In the summer of 1944, after the incredible success of the D-Day landings and the brutal fight out of the Normandy hedgerows, the Allied armies were on a roll. General George S. Patton's Third Army was a spearhead, a blur of motion, racing across France at a speed that stunned the world, especially the German High Command. They were advancing so fast, sometimes 40 to 60 miles in a single day, that they were literally outrunning their own supplies. Imagine a state-of-the-art race car, the fastest on the track, suddenly sputtering and coasting to a stop, not because of engine failure, but because it's out of gas. That was Patton's army in late August 1944, a formidable fighting force of nearly 400,000 men. A mechanized behemoth was about to be paralyzed. The problem was a logistical nightmare of epic proportions. The Allies had planned meticulously for the invasion, but they hadn't anticipated breaking out of Normandy so quickly and advancing so deeply into France in such a short time. The primary ports they had captured, like Cherbourg, were either still in ruins or too far behind the rapidly advancing front lines. The French railway system, a key part of the pre-invasion supply plan, had been systematically bombed into oblivion by the Allies themselves to prevent the Germans from using it. Now, that strategic success was a logistical curse. Every single bullet, every can of rations, and most critically, every gallon of fuel had to be trucked from the beaches of Normandy all the way to the front. The Third Army alone guzzled over 350,000 gallons of gasoline every single day, just to keep moving. Without it, the tanks were just million-dollar steel coffins, and the blitzkrieg would be over. The German generals, who had always prided themselves on their mastery of mobile warfare, reportedly scoffed at the American predicament. They were convinced that this reckless American advance would collapse under its own weight, that no army could sustain such a pace. They were about to be proven wrong in a spectacular fashion. Faced with this crisis, Allied planners came up with a bold, almost audacious solution. An idea born of pure necessity. They would create a massive, one-way, non-stop truck convoy system, a superhighway dedicated solely to supplying the front. This operation needed a name, something that signified priority and urgency. In railroad terminology of the time, a red ball on a freight car meant it was prioritized for express shipping. And so, the legendary Red Ball Express was born. The plan was simple on paper, but monumental in scale. Establish two massive parallel loops of roads running from the Normandy coast to the forward supply depots near Paris and beyond. One route for the loaded trucks heading to the front, and another separate route for the empty trucks returning to the coast. This would be a 24/7 operation, a continuous flowing river of steel and supplies. The entire route was to be closed to all civilian traffic and most other military vehicles. Military police were stationed at every crossroad and in every town to act as traffic cops, ensuring the trucks never stopped, never slowed down. The speed limit was set at a steady but punishing 25 miles per hour. Drivers were strictly forbidden from stopping for anything other than a mechanical breakdown. Maintenance crews and refueling stations were set up along the route, ready to patch up trucks and top off tanks on the fly. This wasn't just a convoy. It was a militarized circulatory system designed to pump the lifeblood of war, gasoline, ammunition, and food, directly to the heart of the fight. The scale was unprecedented. At its peak, the Red Ball Express would operate nearly 6,000 trucks at any given moment, moving over 12,000 tons of supplies every single day. But there was another, even bigger challenge. Where would they find the thousands of experienced drivers needed to operate this massive fleet around the clock? The answer lay in a segment of the U.S. Army that was all too often overlooked and undervalued. Due to the segregationist policies of the era, the vast majority of African American soldiers were relegated to non-combat service and supply roles. Quartermaster and Transportation Corps units were filled with men who were eager to fight for their country, but were denied the opportunity to serve on the front lines. Now, their moment had arrived. Approximately 75% of all the drivers in the Red Ball Express were African American soldiers. These men, many of whom had been truck drivers, mechanics, and laborers in civilian life, were suddenly thrust into the most critical logistical operation of the war. They were given a mission: keep Patton moving, no matter what. The conditions these drivers faced were brutal. They drove for days on end with little to no sleep, fueled by coffee and sheer determination. They navigated roads that were narrow, often damaged by shelling, and clogged with the debris of war. They drove through pouring rain and choking dust, their eyes raw from staring at the road ahead. The routes were marked with simple signs bearing a red ball, guiding them through the unfamiliar French countryside. They drove with their headlights on at night, making them prime targets for the remnants of the German Luftwaffe and for snipers who still lurked in the woods and villages along the route. The danger was constant. These men were not on the front line, but the front line came to them. They were unsung heroes, driving through ambushes and artillery fire to deliver their precious cargo. The trucks they drove were mostly the GMC CCKW, the legendary Deuce and a Half, a 2.5-ton workhorse of the Army. These vehicles were rugged and reliable, but they were not comfortable. They were loud, they rattled bones, and they were often overloaded, sometimes carrying double their intended capacity. Breakdowns were frequent. Drivers had to become expert mechanics on the fly, patching tires, fixing engines, and doing whatever it took to get their vehicle back on the road and rejoin the endless convoy. They knew that every truck that stopped was a gap in the supply line, a delay that could cost lives at the front. The motto became, "Keep 'em rolling," and they lived it every single hour of every single day. They were ordinary men asked to do an extraordinary job, and they delivered. The Red Ball Express ran for 82 consecutive days, from August 25th to November 16th, 1944. In that short time, it transported over 412,000 tons of supplies to the front. It was the critical lifeline that allowed Patton's Third Army and other Allied forces to continue their breathtaking advance across France and push the German army back to its own border. The German generals who had laughed at the American logistical challenge were silenced. They had underestimated the industrial might of the United States, but more importantly, they had underestimated the grit and determination of the American soldier, particularly the forgotten soldiers who made up the backbone of the Express. It was a stunning achievement, a victory not of bullets, but of logistics, grit, and tireless effort. When the port of Antwerp in Belgium was finally cleared and opened in November 1944, and the railway lines were repaired, the need for the Red Ball Express diminished. The operation was officially terminated. The drivers, many of them exhausted beyond measure, were reassigned to other duties. Their incredible contribution was, for a time, largely overlooked by history, overshadowed by the dramatic battles they helped make possible. But their legacy is undeniable. The Red Ball Express proved that modern warfare was won not just by brave soldiers on the front line, but by the equally brave and dedicated soldiers who supported them from behind. It was a powerful demonstration that logistics aren't just part of the war. Logistics are the war. The story of the Red Ball Express is more than just a tale of trucks and supplies. It's a story of innovation under pressure. It's a story of overcoming impossible odds. And most importantly, it's the story of the thousands of African American soldiers who, in the face of discrimination at home and danger abroad, stepped up and became the heroes the Allied war effort desperately needed. They weren't just driving trucks. They were driving the entire Allied army straight to victory. They proved, beyond any doubt, that courage and patriotism know no color. Their tireless work fueled one of the most rapid and decisive military advances in history, forever earning their place as legends of the Second World War. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this story as inspiring as I did, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell so you don't miss our next dive into the forgotten corners of history. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Until next time, stay curious.